Welcome back to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I am your host, Ben Bukulski. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gents. Joining me today, Dr. Tony Galea, Dr. Adeel Khan. If you don't know who they are yet, you will by the end of this episode, and you will want to know more about them. Dr. Galea has been a pioneer in the area of regenerative medicine, for a very long time. He was the physician for Team Canada in the Olympics in Japan in 1998, and he is known around the world for being the guy, the number one guy to go to for healing soft tissue, whether it's with Olympic athletes, professional golfers, NHL hockey players, NFL players. They are traveling to Toronto, Canada from all around the world to work with Tony Galea to heal their tissues. Dr. Adeel Khan joins me today. He is Dr. Galea's mentee. He is an incredible wealth of information when it comes to musculoskeletal science, musculoskeletal medicine, pain medicine, regenerative medicine, and so much more. Today's episode was recorded live in person in Toronto, Canada, in their office where they're seeing patients on a regular basis. And these people are leaving healed. I literally have been around Dr. Galea for coming up on 20 years now, I think. I've been aware of him and in his system, in his ecosystem. He's been helping me keep healthy and heal my body since as long as I can remember. And I'm so excited. And I feel truly grateful to have Dr. Galea and Dr. Khan join me today. A little story for you before we start. In 2013, right after I did the Arnold Classic, most people don't know this, but both my triceps were actually torn. They were torn so bad that I literally couldn't extend my elbows. I couldn't do pull downs. I literally couldn't do anything for triceps. Couldn't do anything for biceps, chest. And I was in a lot of pain and very discouraged. I went to the surgeon. The surgeon said, unfortunately, sir, these are inoperable, which effectively was because the tendon was frayed rather than torn, which meant the outsides of the tendon was still intact and the entire meat of the tendon was frayed. And so there's nothing we can do for this. You would have been better off to have torn it off the bone. So I went to Dr. Galea and I said, Tony, is there anything you can do for me? And he said, absolutely. He helped me through the entire process, which we talk about in this podcast. And to fast forward a little bit, 3 months later, I was back in the gym, training full speed and absolutely crushing it again. I think better than I was before, and truly grateful for Tony and his wisdom, and Dr. Khan now leading my current medical optimization regime. He helps me with a lot of things that we get into in today's podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by two incredible companies that have been longtime sponsors of the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Bubs Naturals, you guys know them, you love them. That's why they continue to come back and support us. They can continue to come back and support you. So I would love it if you would head over to muscleintelligence.com/bubsnaturals and get hooked up with 20% off. If you're not already using MCT powder in your coffee, if you're someone who currently uses any type of dairy in your coffee or any type of almond milk or anything like that, oat milk, I know those are very, very common, but take my word for it. You will thank me when you're done. Grab a tub or two of MCT powder from Bubs. There's nothing like it. It's so delicious, creamy and rich. It far exceeds cream. It far exceeds almond milk and oat milk and all those things. When I have my Bubs Natural MCT with me, I am always a happy man. I tend to drink extra coffee, which is not always good, but I love it. It's delicious. Head over to muscleintelligence.com/bubsnaturals and get hooked up with 20% off your favorite MCT powder and the best quality collagen that exists on the planet. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Mag Breakthrough. If you guys know, Bioptimizers has been a long-time sponsor of the show. Their incredible products are literally changing the industry. Magnesium Breakthrough has all 7 forms of magnesium, which helps all different tissues in your body. You guys have heard me talk about masszymes before. If you're eating any amount of protein in your diet, any large amount of animal protein, taking proteolytic enzymes is highly suggested. They've also got a proteolytic probiotic, which helps with gut health and immune function. They've got so many incredible other products. I strongly suggest you head over to bioptimizers.com. That's BIOPTIMIZERS.com and get hooked up with 10% off when you use the code MUSCLE10 at checkout. Guys, take care of our sponsors. They take care of us, and we will continue to take care of you with the best quality information anywhere on the planet. Thank you so much to Dr. Galea and Dr. Khan for joining me. Enjoy the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I'm sitting here with two amazing gentlemen, Dr. Tony Galea and Dr. Adeel Khan. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we kind of sprung it on them last minute. We're going to record a podcast. These guys are doing some amazing things. Dr. Galea and I worked together was 2013, I think. And I was in excruciating pain, considering retiring from professional bodybuilding because both my triceps were torn. People didn't know that. They're just like, man, your arms are small. I was like, yeah, because I can't physically do anything. I couldn't press. I couldn't do extensions. I literally couldn't do anything. It was affecting bicep curls. And I came to you and you go, yeah, I can help with that. And within, I think 6 or 7 weeks, I had restored full function. And I don't know if you remember what the ultrasound looked like, but I literally had one side was a full centimeter wide tear. Both the outsides were intact. The other one was 4 centimeters long. And by the end of it, and even now, completely restored function. So I'd love to have you just kind of, I know things have changed since then, but I'd love to have you walk through what we did then. And because like I've been the biggest advocate of what you guys do ever since that. I'd love to just kind of walk through like, so we saw this diagnosis. I went to a surgeon. The surgeon said, hey, man, it's inoperable. There's nothing I can do. I'm like, great, career's done. I come to you, and in 6 weeks, I'm back training full speed again. So what happened?
Well, he had a soft tissue injury. Triceps tear was incomplete, was really non-surgical, but you needed your triceps to do what you do. So we elected to do stem cells using bone marrow, I think we did.
We did fat graft.
Fat grafts.
Yep.
Yeah, so what I did is took a little bit of fat. I took out 2 components, the part of the fat that had the stem cells, and then the rest was a scaffold. So I took those stem cells, injected them into the tendon with the fat, and then we seeded it with platelet-rich plasma to help regenerate. You know, in those days, we were allowed to use stem cells, but now we're no longer allowed to use stem cells. Yeah. So, but it really helped. It regenerated your tendons quite quick.
It was unbelievable. Like I didn't even think it was possible. For me, it was like a last-ditch effort. It's like, yeah, I'll try, let's see what happens. And they had me wearing these braces, and I was like trying to brush my teeth and stuff. And then all of a sudden, within just a small amount of time, I was kind of back to normal.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah.
So we're still allowed to use the fat as a scaffold, but we're not allowed to take the stem cells out of the fat.
Right. How do you do that? Is that process just like chemical?
So you could do it chemically, you could do it mechanically. In those days, we did it mechanically. So when you take the fat and you centrifuge the fat, there's a little pellet at the bottom of the fat called the stromal vascular fraction. And all the stem cells are concentrated in there. In those days, we were allowed to strip those stem cells out of that mechanically and take those stem cells and take part of the fat and wash it as the scaffold. So what I would do is take that fat, inject it into your tendon under ultrasound, and then take platelet-rich plasma because it has certain growth factors. They're called cytokines. They're like builders of a house, plumbers, drywall. And you put those components with the raw materials of the stem cells into the fat, and then you get regeneration. I'm not sure if we did hyperbaric at that time. I think we did. Yeah. So then you add another component, the oxygen, which stimulates the nitrous oxide process, speeds up the regeneration. So you create a perfect environment for regeneration.
Right. So I'm smiling over here because I don't remember, you wouldn't remember what you said to me, but I tell everyone this part too. So I was like, are you going to like freeze her in like that? And you literally looked over across the room and you like, see that 12-year-old girl over there? I just injected both her knees. Shut up and sit down. I was like, got it.
So he still practices that way.
Yeah, totally. And that,
the problem is if you put a lot of freezing into the tendon, that dilutes it into the regenerative mix.
Right.
And you don't really want that in.
Right.
So you're tough.
Needless to say, it wasn't comfortable, but it worked extremely well. So average person doesn't have torn triceps, doesn't have torn knees, and obviously you're not able to do the stem cells now. So what does the shift look like now? What are you guys working on now?
Yeah, so what we did from that time, and I was working on it for the last 10 years, but unlike the previous 10 years when I came up with platelet-rich plasma for soft tissue injuries, I was more of a cowboy. I didn't patent anything. I just did it. I didn't get approval.
Now, this is something you came up with on your own.
In 1999, the technology was being used by ear, nose, and throat guys, some spinal guys. But I think I was the first in the world to take that application and use it on muscle injuries, tendon injuries, and joint injuries. But I just did it. Like I didn't, I just did my own experiments in my own little mini lab. I didn't get approvals for everything. So that didn't work out too well for me, even though it did well globally. The whole industry exploded, but personally it didn't work too well for me. So then I developed another process because the platelet-rich plasma in itself doesn't have a lot of anti-inflammatory effect. So I wasn't happy with the outcomes from the PRP. So what I did research on is taking another cell, a type of white blood cell called a monocyte, because I knew it was able to make certain things called inhibitors to inflammatory cytokines like interleukin and these group MMPs that kind of destroy tendons and destroy cartilage. So I did a bunch of research papers. We did everything by the book, IRB approval, all the approvals we needed. Went through all the steps.
Health Canada too.
Yeah, Health Canada approval. So everything was the way it should have been done, what I should have done with the PRP originally. And then we developed a new generation of PRP called cytorich PRP, which is not great for tears, but great for chronic inflammation. So sometimes you have a tendon that has a tear and chronic inflammation. So now I can use PRP plus the cytorich and deal with both issues.
So interesting.
Yeah, and the applications for that for chronic inflammation and pain are huge because of chronic osteoarthritis and spinal conditions and everything else. So that's what we're mainly using it for.
So there's no more needing to take the fat graft or a scaffold. Like, do you still do fat grafts, or do you guys just?
Yeah, well, it depends on the injury. So say, for example, you come in with jumper's knee or chronic quad tendinosis from squatting. So what we do, we see that you have a tear and you have chronic damage, inflammation. So if you put the PRP into that hole, it's going to go right through.
Right.
So what we do is we get the fat as a scaffold. We inject regular PRP into the tear, but then we use cytorich PRP, the one that's anti-inflammatory, on the rest of the tendon. So this way we treat the tendinosis and the degeneration, plus the tear at the same time, and the scaffold.
One of the things that I mentioned that was probably one of the greatest benefits I got, and I was like, I want to do this again, was probably for 6 months after. I felt like I was a newborn baby. So I was getting this systemic decrease in inflammation. So I'd love to have you guys talk about what exactly is happening there.
Well, the stromal fraction is super anti-inflammatory.
So one more time?
The stromal fraction, okay. The part he was talking about, that isolated with the stem cell.
Yep.
So it's the medicinal signaling cells or anti-inflammatory cytokines that it sends out that reduces inflammation. So I'm guessing you probably had a systemic anti-inflammatory effect just because of that.
So would that happen just with the PRP or the cytokine or the cytorich PRP, or do I have to do the fat graft?
Well, you could, like right now, we have another application. We're doing some research. We did what's called in vitro research on using cytorich to try to inhibit the cytokine storm in COVID patients. Yep. Because a gentleman asked me, well, if it's all cytokines, can't you do the same thing, what you did with arthritis with COVID? Yeah. So we did the in vitro work and we showed that, yeah, we can make inhibitors to those same cytokines that cause COVID. So we proved the in vitro, but now we had to prove it clinically. So right now we have a clinical double-blind trial in Europe at a few hospitals where they're using not the platelet component, because you don't want platelets in COVID patients because it throws clots, but the monocyte-derived, the white cell-derived inhibitors to those inflammatory cytokines. So we're doing a clinical trial right now trying to inhibit that, but we're giving it systemically through intravenous. Right. So that's in the middle of a trial right now. We'll see how the outcomes.
So would that be something like someone has to actually?
Well, no. So this is on patients that, they're not doing well. Their oxygen saturation is dropping and they get to around 90 or just under 90. And they're a little bit panicky and they're going to go to the hospital, and the emergency physician says, we better put you in the hospital because your oxygen levels are dropping.
So they've been diagnosed with COVID.
Yeah. So it's that period where they get into trouble. So what we hypothesized is if we can suppress that cytokine storm by inhibiting the cytokines, we're basically flattening the curve,
Right.
give their natural body the ability to
Right.
fight it on its own.
So would this be similar in effect then to the monoclonal antibodies? Different pathway, but
Different pathway.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, because the monoclonal antibodies are inhibiting basically the virus replication itself. We're stopping the inflammatory response. So we're a little bit later down the chain.
It's basically enhanced convalescent plasma. Like convalescent plasma is already a treatment for severe COVID, but
convalescent plasma has been shown not to work.
yeah, so this is enhanced.
So what convalescent plasma is, they were taking people who had COVID, taking their plasma, has antibodies already, and giving it back to the patient. But it doesn't work. It's been shown, the study shows it doesn't work. That's not what we're doing. We're taking the patient's own plasma. They haven't really developed the antibodies. They're in the process of developing the antibodies. But now they're getting this cytokine rush because there's two phases of COVID, really. You have your viral replication phase, then you have this inflammatory or allergic type phase that they're getting into. So what we're doing is, as they come out of COVID or the viral replication at day 8, and we're letting them develop their own antibodies. We're not taking people's blood from somebody else. We're using their own blood, the patient's own blood. So they come to the emerge, we take their blood, put it through the process, develop these inhibitors, and then giving it back to see if we can suppress that storm. But that's what our hypothesis, and that's what they're doing in Europe right now in a few hospitals.
Yeah, so let's come back to the cytorich. I'd like to hear what the application is for like average person. So not everyone's got an injury, not everyone's experiencing massive amounts of arthritis, or maybe they are. But like, what is a typical patient that you guys see on a day-to-day basis coming in to treat with the cytorich?
Maybe if you go through the spinal indications.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common thing is definitely back pain. It's become just so epidemic, especially because of COVID. Everyone's sitting more, but obviously with injuries and.
Right. So tell me how that works specifically, like mechanistically. So
Yeah, so there's a few. So with back pain, it's complex because there's multiple pain generators. So there could be your disc, the facet joints, and the nerve and the muscles. And the problem with the conventional approach is, like, say if you have chronic back pain, you go to a pain doctor, they'll just be like, let's do some cortisone, let's do a nerve block. They're just targeting one specific pain generator. But the reality is you can have multiple pain generators, and the only way to target all those different is using like the different types of PRP, like he was saying. So for example, if I have someone with a chronic degenerative disc disease and arthritis and all that, I can use the cytorich to treat the nerve and reduce the inflammation, and I can also use it to treat the facets. And then I can use a regular PRP to treat the muscle tears and the ligaments to help stabilize the area. So it's like I'm using the different concoctions to target each specific problem. And that way you can get a comprehensive treatment to like someone who's suffering with chronic back pain. But in general, I think like for like the average person, that's definitely the most common thing I'd say we see. And then probably after that's like knee OA and the shoulders.
Yeah, I don't do any spine. He does all the spine and back. I just do.
He doesn't want the complicated stuff.
No, I like, to me, I like, knees and tendons or shoulders, elbows and stuff. So my thing is a little bit easier because I look at chronic inflammation and then I kind of dissect it from what's acute on chronic or what's just chronic. So for example, say you have patellar tendonitis, you're lifting all the time, some of that's acute, but some of it's chronic. So you come in and I have to decide, well, how much is that acute, which is new injury, and how much is old injury? So then when we approach it, the pathways of causation are completely different.
Right.
So you come in, you say you have tendonitis for 3 weeks, it's not going to do anything for that. It's an acute inflammatory reaction. It's a normal rebooting process. But what if 3 weeks, 4 weeks goes on? Now it's 10 weeks. So now you go in a different pathway called the chronic inflammatory pathway.
Yep.
That's where what I do will inhibit that chronic part.
And you're able to start reversing the chronic inflammation.
Yes.
It changes from catabolic to anabolic. That's kind of the idea. instead of breaking down and degradation, you're going to have actual regeneration and restoration.
How long does it last?
Well,
Depends what you do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're doing a tear, like, and I think to your earlier question about like a lot of people who work out and have nagging injuries, a lot of times they're actually chronic low-grade tears. They just never get assessed properly. And because of our diagnostic skills, we're able to pick up a lot of those small tears, right. Especially in like bodybuilders. They're so like they're so common.
Where it becomes complicated is some people say, "Oh, you're going to get new cartilage." That's a lie.
Right.
You're not going to get new cartilage. Even with stem cells, you're not getting new cartilage. Anybody who says they're building new cartilage with stem cells, leave.
Right.
They're lying. It's not going to happen. You're creating an environment where you're getting rid of the inflammation, so you're not getting pain. You may get some regenerative stuff in tendons, but to build new cartilage once it's gone, not going to happen.
Without a 3D bioprinter.
Right.
That's the only way. So they need, because what he was talking about earlier is basically you need a scaffold and you need progenitor cells and you need growth factors. Right. So you need, that's called a regenerative triangle. So you need that regenerative triangle to truly regrow tissue. So when someone says they're doing stem cells for your knee joint and we're going to regrow your cartilage, they're lying to you. But unfortunately, that still happens in the US especially. So the only way to really do it is use a 3D bioprinter where they print an actual scaffold using like polymer hydrogels, and then they seed it with stem cells, and then they actually use arthroscope and like will actually almost regrow like a new hip or a new knee.
Right.
But that's still experimental like trials.
So you guys have like mythical status in the athletic world, right? And this is being honest. Like every pro athlete we talk to, like Dr. G, Dr. Khan, I'm like, yep. So I'd love to just have you guys share some like stories, and you have to share names, but like I've heard so many miraculous stories of like, yeah, this guy just got his ACL torn, and three days later he's back on the ice because he went to see Dr. Khan and Dr. G. So I'm curious, like, what have been some miraculous, like kind of turnarounds you guys have experienced?
Well, there's been a lot. Luckily, I've been doing this 30 years, which is fun. But a fun one for me, there's been lots, like a lot of pro athletes, but a fun one, which I can use his name. He was a sprinter, hurtler for Gatemans, came out as Ronald Forbes. So he ruptured his Achilles, and he said, "I'm competing in the Rio Olympics in 3 months, and I'm the flag bearer, and I want to run." So I'm going, whoa. So I go, like, I remember when, in Donovan's case, we got him back, and that was fast.
How long was that?
Well, I had a 6-month window, but that was in a day when no one was doing fast rehab, and
right.
I was a little bit, some people say, off the edge.
Right, pushing
but
a little bit.
Was pushing, but 3 months was really pushing. So it was fun. So we got him back. We did all our regenerative stuff, put him in the hyperbaric rehab and stuff like this. So he hasn't ran or jumped a hurdle, and he lands in Brazil. So, he carries the flag for the country. Everything's good. So I think within a few days, he starts running the track. He's looking good. He starts training on women's hurdles, and then the men's finals comes. And I'm thinking, oh, here, 3 months, this thing explodes. I'm done. I'm thinking, this is going to be terrible. But he ran. He finished last, but he did what he wanted to achieve. And that was fun because, he wanted to carry the flag. He wanted to run in the finals. Right. And then, he was great. So that was a fun one.
Wow, that's really cool. Olympic bobsledder, she wanted to get back to... she had to do her trials, like they had to qualify, so they have to do a bunch of weight training, and they have to like do that, and she had to do it literally within like 3 weeks, and she had a hamstring tear, like acutely, like sprinting. So I just luckily I got her in through Alex, she got her in right away, and we did the PRP, and then a week later she was like, I'm pain-free and I can sprint again. Like, it was unbelievable. But it's also because she's young, she's healthy, all those other factors, but that type of stuff where it's like normally if you have a tear like that, it can take months, right? And so the PRP was able to get her back really quickly.
So I love the idea of I always talk about, the highest level of human achievement, and you guys are pushing the envelope psychologically and then applying it in practice. And I'm really curious what's possible, right? When you're doing, that's why I asked this question, why are we not allowed to push the envelope of healing the human system? Is it just the safety regulations the government's worried about? Hey, this may not be safe? Would there possibly be negative repercussions? Like, what would be? I get you. This is a long time ago, and you wouldn't do it now. But in theory, like, what is the trepidation on that? Is it, other than the fact that it's not financially lucrative?
It's there's something in medicine called standard of care.
Yeah.
Like it's like a menu-driven recipe that, this is what everybody has to do, and you got to stay in that box.
Right.
The problem is, if you go out of the box, you got to be careful how far out, because now you're exposing yourself, and if something goes wrong, no one's going to really come to your aid because you're doing things outside what's recommended. In sports medicine, in the early days, it was a lot easier to step out of the box than it is today. Like, I'm glad I was back in that day, not really in today's time, because it was like pioneers. We were able to do stuff. It was a new field.
Well, it's still happening. Like, there's no way that someone who's training at the top of the Tour de France or the top of the Olympics is like, hey, man, I know this doc over here has got some stuff, but he's definitely not going to use it on me. Like, come on, like, the Russians are definitely going to follow the rules.
Well, everybody looks at performance enhancement drugs as, from our perspective, or my perspective, it wasn't about making somebody bigger, faster, stronger. It was just trying to mimic the body's healing.
Well, as an athlete, if you could give me that back, like when I left after having my tricep, like, it was like you gave me my life back. It wasn't just like, it was like my career was over. It was like, there's no way I can continue. I can lift my arms. And so what that to me is like, you're not giving me a new gear. You're simply giving me hope. You're giving me the ability to go back and do what I love. And to take that away from somebody is ridiculous. And I understand the hypothetical, like, this person, this standard of care isn't replicable, or it's not, we don't know what the potential side effects are. I get that whole angle, but at the end of the day, if the athlete's willing to take that chance and the doctor's like, yeah, I think I know what to do. I mean, to me, like, we got to find a country where we can just like get out of here.
Well, that's what you just touched on. Canada's very conservative. Like, the innovation here is so slow compared to like Asia and Europe and a lot of other places, especially with stem cells and like regenerative medicine. So they're just very conservative, probably for many reasons, but I don't know why.
But, justly slow, because if you look at the whole stem cell thing, so we were doing it in a certain fashion, but then there were guys using stem cells, and they were making all sorts of claims: new cartilage, new tendons. We're going to do this.
Injecting people's eyes.
Exactly. So it got out of control. Yeah. So the problem is, how do you control that market? Well, you can't say, well, you're allowed and you're not. Right. So you have to just shut it down until they could get better controls for everybody. And I could understand where the ministry is coming from, because there were guys doing stupid stuff with stem cells. Right. And they shouldn't have been doing it. Yeah. And they were saying things that they shouldn't have been saying.
Yep. And stem cells can actually cause harm. There's people doing stupid stuff with PRP too, but at least PRP can't cause harm. Right. Like, they're not doing it properly. They're not using the right type of PRP.
Let's give an example what stem cells could do that would be harmful.
Well, you can actually grow tumors. Like, there's been case reports with spinal tumors. There's been blindness reported as well.
I've heard that lady was on my podcast.
The blind one?
No, the one who she injected the guy's eyes and he went blind.
Oh my God.
So I'm not going to say that.
Yeah. So there's real risk with stem cells. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, and there's, people were doing it for everything from, we're going to make you younger, or we're going to inject it, in your skin.
Yeah. And the problem is, not work for those things.
The supportive data is weak. Yeah.
But cosmetics will grasp at straws. Like they'll take anything.
At least in stuff we did, like with tendons. It was pretty black and white.
And the science makes sense, right? Mechanistically.
Well, the guy would say, yeah, I can run, or my Achilles is messed. You didn't fix me. So for your triceps, it was a simple answer: can I lift or can't I lift? Right. So whereas in cosmetics, it's a little bit different. Saying, well, anti-aging, knew this, knew that. And they're hard to measure. In you, it's easy to measure. Was the triceps healthy? Right. Could you lift? Could you go back to do what you did? Yeah. And those were easy parameters to measure. Yeah. But in some of the things people did, you can't measure.
And the stem cells they're actually doing in US, because they still do it in US, aren't actually stem cells because they're not actually culturing them or growing them in a lab. So they're just taking your bone marrow or fat, but they're not actually getting the right number of progenitor cells that you need.
Right. Can you talk about the difference between the different types, like mesenchymal stem cells? They have like the
Amniotic, yeah. Or, yeah.
And we can't do any of that in Canada, right? In the US, they're doing some of it.
Yeah.
And now, is there actually a difference in the efficacy?
Well, I think we got to look at is get away from the term stem cell, because really it's all about cytokines. Because cytokines are these messenger proteins that tell cells what to do. And all the stem cells are a lot of cytokines that are derived from stem cells. So people use the term stem cell and they think, well, I'm going to get new tissue. But that's not how they work. They're creating these cytokines that are signaling cells to other tissue, send me this, build this, do this. And stem cells have a lot of cytokines. So these amniotic fluid things that everybody using now as injections, they're just cytokines, different formulas. And that's what I try to do with cytorich PRP, is create a cytokine profile, but I wanted it standardized. So I wanted to know from injection to injection what my cytokine recipe is and what I'm inhibiting. So you're not really standardizing the formula. You can't replicate it from injection to injection to injection.
Yeah, I probably get asked that every day. They're like, oh, should I just go to US and do stem cells? And I'm like, no, cytorich. And then I explain why cytorich and what he just said. It's all about the messenger cells, not about the actual stem cells.
You guys are kind of identifying specific cytokine ranges, it sounds like. Could you actually do the same thing for different tissues in the body? So my brain goes immediately to like inflammatory disease of the brain, heart, the liver. Could you, in theory, isolate the cytokines that would specifically isolate or target those tissues?
Yes. So that's why what we did is we applied inflammation is inflammation, but different pathways in different tissues, very similar pathways. That's why we kind of, when I was asked to see if I can do what I did with inflammation of the knee with the cytokines to the COVID, that's lung. So the cytokines, instead of being in the knee, are being rushed into the lung. Mm-hmm. So they're different pathways, very similar pathways at the end of the day. So if we can inhibit inflammation in different tissues, we could probably prevent a lot of damage to those tissues. Our focus is muscle, tendon, bone. That's where our specialty lies. The COVID stuff, I'm not doing the clinical trial. I just designed the theory and the protocols. But the intensive care physician and respirologists are doing it in Europe because that's their specialty.
Right. So in theory, if we're getting cytorich injections in knee and shoulder and elbow, it should still positively affect the heart, the brain, and lungs, and everything else.
No, because it's being absorbed by receptor sites in that tissue in the joint, so it's very localized. Now, systemically, when we're giving it, that's a different process. And you get more whole body effect.
Right. So is this something you guys have had synthesized and patented that's made outside of the lab? Or is it something like someone comes in, gives you their blood and you spin it and you just extract a certain kind of fraction of the blood?
So right now with that cytorich PRP, it's your own blood. Mm-hmm. And we make it in-house, and we're the process. We have patents globally in every country in the world. And we're just developing the hardware to make it universal. So the type of kits, the tubes, to have standardized kits, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Adeel, you're quickly gaining this amazing reputation around helping people. What's your favorite part of, obviously you're working specifically on the spine, but what's your, the favorite part of what you see in the future that's coming?
Yeah, it's the regenerative medicine. That's the future for sure. It's I think eventually we'll be able to figure out the profiles of those inflammatory pathways and target those specifically. And they're already starting to do that with immunotherapies and using CRISPR technology and gene editing, where they can actually target, and for even in cancer, what those specific pathways are and target those. So it's all about cellular signaling. And that's what regenerative medicine is all about. And that's actually what cytorich is. So, because what Tony did was, I don't know how you thought about it, but but everyone's talking about it now. But 10 years ago, I don't know how you came across with that idea, but everyone's talking about cellular pathways and cellular signaling now, and how do we stop those different pathways? Like, for example, like the aging pathways, right? Like there's like 7 pathways that have been identified.
You read my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know I was going to bug you on that. So we talked the other day, and you said, maybe I'll tell you on the podcast. And let's talk about those seven pathways of longevity and what you just said.
Well, so they're like different. There's like mitochondrial dysfunction. There's increase in like protein turnover. There's cellular senescence. There's chronic inflammation. You can also get glucose intolerance, or some those can be signs of aging as well. I can't remember what the others are, but generally all those different pathways and how to target those is where the research is heading. But you know what the best way to target all those pathways is high intensity resistance training. And that actually, there's been studies done, and even in elderly folks, that they activate all those different pathways, and that's the best way to fight aging by far and longevity is putting on muscle, right? And so muscle's protective for your organs. It's like I like saying it's like body armor for your your actual physical body, right?
I'd love to hear both of your opinions as far as you guys weight train, like the thoughts around the actual nutritional state during the exercise itself and how much that's actually implicating in the outcome, right? So if I'm training really hard in a really fed state versus training hard in a really fasted state versus somewhere in between, I'm curious if you guys have thought through how that would be implicated in the actual outcome of the exercise itself and how it's affecting the cytokine response from training, or the myokine response in this case. Well, fasting increases the cellular pathways of like reducing inflammation and with cellular senescence, but I think performance, especially with high intensity resistance training, goes down as you do fasted, and you can't. And the other thing is, there's actually been study. There's a case report. You probably know Peter Attia. He had a patient who they did an intermittent fasting protocol for, and they lost like 50 pounds, but their body fat went from like 18 to 30%. So they lost muscle. They lost a lot of muscle because they were just doing walking and yoga, and then just like fasting and just eating like low calorie diet, low protein. So it's actually the opposite of what you want. But you're like, oh, I lost all this weight. But then you're actually longevity wise and health wise, you're worse off. Right. So that's what people don't realize, I think, with that stuff. So Dr. G, talk to me about your dietary choices, because that's.
Well, I'm probably not. I'm a vegan.
I know you're a vegan, but that's why I want you to talk about it. So I want to ask smart people why they do what they do, and that's why I have a podcast. It's like I have this amazing opportunity to talk to some of the brightest people in the world, and you made that decision. You've done it for a long time. And I'd love to hear the logic and the rationale why, because I'm sure it's something you maybe even explore on a regular basis.
It's probably a weird answer, because I didn't do it really for health reasons. My thought process when I became a vegan was plants give off oxygen, right? So, and we give off carbon dioxide, but we have this symbiotic relationship. So my thinking, and I don't know if I was meditating or not, was that I'm trying to be the best healer I can. So if I don't destroy life, if I don't take spirit of animal, and I only eat plants, I'm going to be able to give off that kind of energy to my patients. So that's why I became a vegan.
So it's a bit of a spiritual, esoteric response. That's a great response. I would have never expected that, because I would suspect if you ask any healer, in the Peruvian jungle, I'm going to say they'd say something very similar, right? Yeah. Would you eat lab-grown meat?
What's that?
Lab-grown meat? They have that in Israel. The first
No.
that you wouldn't? Why?
No, because the other part of my theory is that you can put all like vitamins and supplements, all that stuff. You can put them in a bowl, but then put food in the bowl. Come back in a year, the food is gone. But the pills, they're still there. Right. So there's a life force
breaking down
in its energy. Right? There's some unseen force as life that makes me similar to you, similar to that plant. That is common. So that's why I want the energy of that substance in its real form.
Right.
A lab-grown thing, there's no life
Right.
to that.
That makes no sense.
No sense.
To include all the genetically modified crops, right?
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
what do I want with this? It's like grown in pesticide.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. We watch some interesting documentaries, and like the idea of not allowing animals to die. Like there's this beautiful cycle of life where the animals eat plants, and it's like this turnover that creates diversity, right? If we all become plant based, you understand the idea behind the monocrops. It's killing everything. And so I think that's way more detrimental to the world. I'd love to have like the ability to exist in our 18,000 acre forest and kind of forage for yourself.
Yeah, but you gotta remember, I'm a healer. That's my role.
Right.
But everybody can't be healers.
Right.
Then we won't have anybody doing any other things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the diversity of our human species.
Right.
That's my role.
You opened up the can of worms now, so I got to go down this path. So as a healer, how much are you looking at people's other energetic considerations? So someone's psychological health or spirituality, they're just like health outside of the physical realm.
Well, for me, like healing happens when they open the door.
Yeah.
So you have to emit an energy, which is, hope. They're going to get better. You have to kind of read the scenario to kind of gauge how they feel. Are they depressed? Are they down? Because a lot of sports people get very anxious when they're not competing.
Totally. Yeah.
And because that's their lifestyle. So you have to be able to bring that in and heal that component.
Right. So when you guys are talking about healing, how much are you looking at the considerations around like photons of light and frequencies? Are you incorporating that into the healing process? Or because ultimately know we're frequency-based beings?
Well, we don't need to because it's the Tony Galea effect. He just touches someone and they get better.
I don't know, man.
He has
a lot of level of science
yeah.
there, right?
No, but seriously, what he's saying is so true, right? Is how you interact with the patient is so important. And and there's something called nocebo effect, which is, right, right? It can cause negative outcomes if patients don't think they're going to get better. So, and there's obviously placebo effect. So it's all how you interact with them. But we don't do the energy medicine stuff, I guess, but like I think it's the way we carry ourselves.
So I don't want to make that sound esoteric. Like when I say like actual frequency, right? So we know every cell vibrates frequency, and I'm curious at what level you guys would ever consider that as part of the healing process. You ever thought about that?
I do. Like for me, even the light exposure, natural light. Like a lot of my patients, I tell them, if they live out in the country, not in the city, no curtains.
Yeah.
Let the light touch them in the morning. Respond to that circadian flow.
Right.
I think monitoring sometimes your sleep behavior is better than checking all your fitness stats. Because most of the healing and the building, the regeneration, from my perspective, comes during that sleep phase.
Yeah. How much are you considering things like EMF? Like personally, not with your patients, but are you aware of potential negative effects of like 5G being kind of blanketing?
I haven't researched it enough to make a educated conclusion. I don't know.
Yeah, still I think to be decided, but I think I think what you were saying earlier about like all the different lifestyle factors is that's all so important. Even with what we do because of chronic pain and all that stuff, you have to optimize all that. And same with the hormones, right? And that's why, like I was going to say earlier about the peptides can be healing too with the PRP and everything else, right?
Yeah. So are you guys incorporating peptides into the therapy?
Well, some of my pro bodybuilders, they use like BPC 157 in addition to what they're doing, and I've seen better healing.
I've seen crazy stuff. Have you looked at the research with that?
I've looked at the research, but
it's still just animal studies. Yeah. So anecdotally, with just some of my pro guys, I've seen them heal faster than they would without it. And William Seeds, he's an ortho guy in the States, and he uses a lot of peptides with PRP. Yeah. But there's still just not really definitive research on it.
Yeah. So I actually have taken a lot of his peptide courses, and I'm open-minded, but always skeptical. I always say I'm an open-minded skeptic, right? So yeah, it seems like there's definitely something there, but we don't know the contraindications. We don't know the
Exactly,
so
yeah.
it's like,
You still need human trials, right? And so that's why I just don't like when people are like advertising peptides will save you, treat all your injuries. I have people every week, they ask me, they're like, can I just take peptides? Why do I have to do PRP? It's like,
right.
It's like,
Right.
it's like,
I've seen BBC do miraculous things.
It is cool. We definitely need some human trials for that.
Yeah. So we mentioned a book called Healing is Frequency, and you mentioned there's a deeper level of kind of tapping into frequency. So it's not something we can measure, but you kind of were going off and saying what specifically this is.
Yeah, I think everybody has the capacity to tap into their frequency and energy. The problem with most of us in our society, we create an attachment to thought.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn from a young age to think, and you think that because you think that's who you think you are by what you think.
Right.
But at some point, you have to be able to separate and learn the ability to separate your thought from who you really are. You know, some people call it the I am, right? You get back as far as you can to get to that I am phase, because in that phase, you disassociate from your thought process. But that's the part that is like walking by a tree, right? Or a nice flower. Everybody, oh, look how nice that flower is. Oh, nice that tree is. But no one ever thinks, or I wonder what the tree thinks of me, you know, to allow the tree in to see yourself. So eliminate thought to get into those frequencies of energy. If you can do that, you can tap into a lot of power. And to me, I think people look at anti-aging and stuff like that. Once you tap in, you can regenerate that type of flow of energy. That's very powerful.
Have you studied shamanism? Like, or read about any of the shaman
Well,
practices?
if you look at all the mystics,
Yeah.
the shaman, the Kabbalists, the Sufis,
Yeah.
the Hindus, any of the mystics,
Yeah.
all of them, their thought process is the same. There's no thought.
Right.
They're beyond thought.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful existence. So they don't react, they don't get attached, and they don't resist anything. It's just the way it is. And if you get into that realm where, you know, you don't create anxiety, no cortisol, no cortisol levels, no burnout, no stress, no inflammation, no aging, right? So if you tap into that life force of energy and frequency, you could create and emit that positive healing energy yourself.
Yeah. So the reason I specifically asked about shamanism is there's some interesting reads talking about the practices of becoming a shaman, which ultimately takes 10 years of living in the jungle and basically living on the land. And some of these people who actually do it suggest that you just learn plants. Like the plants that ultimately, like they say, they speak to you. Like, oh, I know what that does. I know that plant goes. Like, if you think of like ayahuasca as an example, it's some obscure bark and some vine, and they put them together and boil them. Like, who figured that out? And apparently these shaman just become so in tune with every single thing in their environment that they literally have a communication system with, like, oh yeah, this is what your body needs, and they can give it to you. And that to me is like, you know, the ultimate connection with source.
Well, it's alchemy.
Yeah.
It's true alchemy. And we were like that up till probably the early 20th century, when we kind of went to petroleum-based products, pharmaceutical industry, and medicine left that wholeness, I call it, to more of a pharma-based, petroleum-based industry.
So how'd you end up as a doctor? I feel like you should be living it now.
Oh, he's a healer.
Yeah.
We can heal.
Yeah. So when you were young, did you have this awareness of this desire to heal?
Yeah, I always liked I like anatomy. I like alchemy. I always liked the mystic teachings from a young age. And there were a couple ancient healers, there was a guy named Maimonides who worked for one of the sultans in the Middle East, but the guy was a brilliant physician. He was preventative health, talked about diet, nutrition, sleep. He knew all the plants, but he was a philosopher, a mystic. And I think, that type of physician, to me, was what a real physician was. They were scientists, they were mystics, true healers. But that kind of physician now is
it's rare.
But it's hard to exist in this reality, right? Because there's so many things you have to do to keep up or to exist in this current society. Yeah. You almost have to remove yourself.
Well, it's interesting because there's science now from Yale. There's something called evolutionary mismatch, which is basically that we're mismatched. Our genes are mismatched to the current environment, and that's the reason for basically all chronic diseases, 100%. Right? And that's exactly what he was just saying. Is like our bodies are designed to do certain things, but we're not. Our environment isn't matched to that, and so that's what causes all these chronic diseases.
Yeah, and do you think that's kind of part of what's happening now with this? What they're saying is like the Great Awakening. Is there a separation in the population? Like people are actually coming to awareness that they just don't want to exist in this anymore?
Well, I think something's happening for sure, and some people have called it entering into the divine feminine energy, where there's this balance returning between divine feminine, divine masculine, and this awakening process. And a lot of people are feeling that kind of something's happening. And I do think energy is playing a big role in that. And it doesn't matter what religion background you are. It's at the end of the day, all the mystics talk about oneness. We're all one in essence.
Right. So what's your 25-year plan? Because it sounds to me like this is a blip on the radar for you guys.
I will practice medicine hopefully as long as I live.
Yeah.
Maybe not, 4 days a week, maybe 2 days a week. Do some work in the lab, but I like to kind of broaden my horizons like the old sages of ancient times and try to acquire more knowledge and stuff like that.
That's awesome. How about yourself?
Yeah, I want to push the boundaries in regenerative medicine over the next 25 years as much as possible. So
what does that look like? Well,
I'm hoping we can establish a center somewhere off-site, because then we can actually do stem cells, culture them, and start doing more studies with that.
Yeah. So it's a medical approach rather than like, Tony's talking about like the returning to ancestral practices.
I mean, maybe when I'm 80, but I am 30 years younger than him, so I don't know. We'll see. So for now, I think I want to focus. Regenerative medicine is just such an exciting field, and I think there's so many opportunities to help so many people. And it's I think most people like it, right? Like it's healing your own body naturally. We're just giving it the right signals and the right tools it needs.
Yeah.
And that's all it's about. So it's all about cellular signaling, and how do we do that? Right. And it's a combination of the lifestyle stuff and the different treatments that we have.
So here's the question. When are we writing the book on how people need to return to true health, true healing, right? That's the next step. It's like there's so many facets, and the world needs this conversation from people who have been doing it this long and who have their respect and attention.
I don't know if it's a book or you take people out on kind of a different style of workshop where it's more, scientific, research, meditative, like the whole package, not just these one little segment, but everything, right from science, R&D, right to the mystics.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? Yeah, that's beautiful. Very cool. So I would love to tell the audience how they can get in touch with you guys and get out here to work with you guys personally. And as far as the audience goes, like anyone who has any injuries, anyone who's looking to optimize their body, whether an athlete or not, like I couldn't recommend this treatment more. I'm coming in just to do it because I want everything to feel better. I mean, if I get half the effect I did last time, it'll be completely 10x worth what I'm investing. So if you guys want to let them know where we can find you.
Well, we have our website, Institute of Human Mechanics. I think that's the easiest way to see what we have to offer. For me, I'm on social media. So dr.akhan, Khan.
No,
He's fine.
No.
He's
Just
still,
for show.
yeah. I'm the social media guy. So you can just email me on there. Don't DM though. I'm sure you know DMs. Just I can't check them all. So
I can't slide into your DMs.
yeah, no. But you can email. Yeah.
Guys, that was awesome. Like so valuable. Thank you for your time and your wisdom. And I hope you guys continue to do it and hopefully get an open space to be able to really dive in with all your wisdom and less regulation. Yeah.
Well,
If not here, somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. From
Yeah.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks. Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, man. That was so great.
All right, ladies and gents, that's a wrap. Thank you so much to Tony Galea. Thank you so much to Adeel Khan for joining me. If you guys want to get in touch with them, they are located in Toronto, Canada, and there will be information about how to reach them and access their clinic in the show notes. You head over to muscleintelligence.com/podcast. You can find that there as well as anywhere where you listen to podcasts. My favorite place to listen to podcasts lately has been Spotify. Thank you to Spotify. Thank you to Apple. Thank you even to Amazon now that is hosting podcasts. Guys, I feel truly privileged to not only be able to interview the smartest people in the world, but to bring you the greatest information that exists in the world so that you can live your greatest life in a body that you absolutely love. My passion in life has become truly helping people. I realized I would do it for free, and it feels like such a gift to be able to talk to people like Dr. Galea, talk to people like Dr. Khan, make them friends, understand them, and ultimately take this information and relay it back to you, to my clients, to my family, and ultimately apply it to myself. I have become the consummate biohacker lately, doing so many, and I don't like the term, but using so many different modalities to figure out how I can ultimately optimize my physique, bring you feedback on how you can optimize your physique, your mental health, your physical health, and everything in between. So ultimately, you can show up at your highest and best for yourself. You can show up at the highest and best for your family, for your team, for your business, and ultimately live your greatest life in the body you love. Have a great day, gents. Ladies, thank you for being here. Don't forget to take care of our sponsors, guys. Head over to buyoptimizers.com. Use the code MUSCLE10 to get hooked up with 10% off. And when you're done there, head over to muscleintelligence.com/BubsNaturals to get 20% off. Use the code MUSCLE. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Mikulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.